Sponsored by 1010 Podcasts.
The Celtic Exchange, a fresh insight on Celtic Football Club.
Welcome to episode 30 of the Celtic Exchange. This is Tino, and today I'm joined by Miff and James. Celtic played their first game under Ange Postecoglou this week, and after a shaky start, they eventually kicked into gear, following a strike from captain for the day, Albian Ajeti. Yes, you heard that right, captain Albian Ajeti. It was an interesting move by the manager, but if that doesn't signify clean slates for everyone at Celtic Park this summer, then I don't know what does. Miff, was it good just to see a Celtic team take to the park again after a long few weeks?
Hello Tino, hello James, hello listeners. Yes, it was. I was just very excited to see the team back and playing with a bit of vigour under Ange for the first couple of games. Bit of a shaky start, a wee bit worried when we lost a goal so early. I know you don't read too much into these games, it is all about fitness, but at the same time you're hoping to see just something, especially when it's under a new manager. And as both games have kind of worn on, I think we have seen that. I think we have seen a change in style, a bit more energy around trying to win the ball back when we don't have it, pretty much flooding forward to support the attack. Maybe a bit more in line with the days of Tommy Burns. When you look at how many men we're trying to get forward. The great example being the quotes this week regarding Olivier and Cham, Ajeti been really prominent pre-season, captain's armband looks a lot slimmer, scored a couple of goals and looks sharp as a result as well. So small tweaks and changes, but definitely I would class myself as extremely concerned at the lack of kind of substantial transfer activity. We need established players in the door quickly. We've been saying that for a long time now, and it doesn't seem any closer to coming.
Yeah, and even on that very note, Ange, when he was asked at his opening press conference that day with Don Mackay, when did he hope or expect to have players in, he said yesterday, flippantly and all that kind of stuff. That in itself was a couple of weeks ago now, so you're absolutely right, Biff. James, what about yourself? Any headlines or takeaways from the two games so far?
First time I've seen Celtic players playing with smiles on their faces in a long time, and that's always good to see. McGregor in particular, I thought this kind of game is really suited to him. What we've seen from him in the last 12, 18 months maybe even, has been hard to see, and good to see him playing with a smile on his face and just enjoying that high tempo and the Tommy Burns style that Miff referenced. So it could be an exciting and terrifying season.
Yeah, it could be. You say smiles on their faces. Wee Karamoko's not a smiler, is he?
No, he isn't. He isn't. Although, if you look today, there is a photo of him smiling at training.
Almost as if to prove us wrong.
Aye.
We'll dig that one out and we'll post it online. So obviously a lot of the development players started the game against Sheffield Wednesday, and as we'd mentioned, that shaky start, certainly the first 5-10 minutes, really couldn't get out, and it was clear right from the off that they were dictated to play from the back. So it started with Barkas, and they were popping about, a bit sketchy, a bit out of touch, as you'd expect from the very first game. But slowly but surely they got their way into the game. As I mentioned, Albian Ajeti scored the first goal and just settled everyone down. Did any of the development players stand out for you, Miff, in those early stages?
I really liked Owan Moffat. I think that goes without saying. They obviously scored a goal, but it was a really energetic performance overall. The one player that stood out to me in both games has been William Shaw. I think just for a physicality point of view, he just gets his self about the park really, really well, and also has a bit about him when he's on the ball. So for me, I think there might be some surprises this season because, Ange doesn't seem to really have any other option at the minute but to use these kids on the assumption that they're probably going to start against Mitchell, and some of them are, because they're match fit, they're ready, they've had the most of pre-season under their belt, and there doesn't appear to be ready-made signings coming in the door. So I don't necessarily have too much of a problem with that. He seems to be placing a bit of trust in them. Adam Montgomery's another one I would mention as well, by the way.
Yeah.
So do you know what? I'm all for it. Why go back and bring in guys that maybe aren't fit, that have been at the Euros or whatever? Put your trust in these guys. Let's play them. See how good they are under pressure, and then are they actually going to be additions to the squad ongoing for the rest of the season? I think that's what's going to be the surprising element, is that you're maybe going to see 3 or 4 of these guys coming in and playing a significant role, and I'd be delighted if that was the case.
Yeah, and I think as it happens, Ange may have no choice, but many a player went on to achieve things after being thrown in at the deep end, unplanned or whatever, and before you know it, they went to prominence. So it could be the case for some of these young guys that this is the biggest chance they'll ever get to break through. There's so many kids that come through the conveyor belt at Celtic, and as we've mentioned previously, they go to Ross County or they go down south and they never quite make it. This is a real chance for some of these kids to kick on and actually, put a marker down for themselves.
And I think that in reference to the style of play, with it being such high intensity and high energy, as young legs can sometimes
helps you,
bring that out as well. They'll play without that fear that maybe a more experienced player would. So there might be a wee bit in that, but I don't know if I'm just maybe clutching at straws. The lack of activity is really, really demoralising. I think is as good as it's been to see a fresh style and like James referenced there, a kind of better atmosphere about the camp. It's equally as demoralising on the other end of things that off the park we just haven't got the business done that everybody knows we've needed done, and it's alarming to me that we haven't even been able to push one significant deal over the line. That's just worrying to me.
Yeah, touched on it last week, but it could be that the transfer window really opens today, post Euros or something like that. But what I would say we need to be careful of is that we've all been very positive about Ange's appointment, and we're now being positive about the kids because they're coming in, they're showing just some exciting football. But let's not pretend that first choice wasn't signings. Let's get signings in first. Second choice is youth. Third choice is the guys who couldn't do it last season. Your Beatons, your Ralsons, and sorry to pick out Ralston, but Ralston and your pal Taylor, they were the worst performers on Saturday from what I saw. So I think we've got to keep the pressure on Celtic in terms of it's signings that are required, and youth should be the second choice.
Yeah. I think Christian and Cham are also vying for that worst performer on Saturday, but we'll maybe cover that in a bit more detail shortly. And just in terms of signings though, I suppose to pose the question, is it Celtic being Celtic in the transfer window? Every chance. Or is it just the way the window is in the modern game? It's a bit of cat and mouse between clubs, players, agents. We're doing it with Ayer. We're playing the game from our side, so we can't expect everyone else to bow down because we need players, from a signing point of view. So do you think there's a bit of both going on? Because, yeah, we'd all love to see signings, but not just for signing's sake. So I'd hate for Celtic just to announce tomorrow, we're under a bit of pressure, just go for that guy then, even though he's fourth choice, rather than trying to hold out for the desired right back or the desired centre-half. I mean, where would you land on that?
If I didn't know what Celtic typically do in that position, as in do what they do just now, nothing, wait till the last day and then make a mess of it. So if they were going to get that right back, first choice right back on the last day of the transfer window, then yeah, I could be patient with that. But what they actually end up doing is going for that guy, making a mess of it and signing nobody.
I mean, there's so many names doing the rounds as well, and it's hard to know what's genuine and what's not. There's the various centre-halves that have been mentioned, and different weeks gone by, we've mentioned the names and we've gone into a bit of detail. It's a bit of a futile task though, isn't it? Because you can cover so many of these guys, and actually it just all falls through and you never hear of them. So we'll maybe do a wee bit of less of that going forward, and there's plenty of guys online that do cover those subjects in a bit more detail. In terms of the priorities, so for me, it's absolutely a goalie. I know Barkas, or Barkey, as he has now been fondly known, he's getting the nod to start the games.
Big fan of Ange calling him Barkey.
Aye, if not his goalkeeping skills. So he's obviously started the first couple of games. He's done fine. He made a couple of decent saves. Bain made an extraordinary save actually towards the end of the Charlton game. But none of the two of them are filling you with confidence, I've got to say. Barkas, obviously under instruction, is also playing very, very high up the
halfway
park.
line stuff.
Dave Marshall stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll cover that as well. But goalkeeping, I'm definitely not comfortable with. And as mentioned, right back, it's a glaring deficiency in the squad at this moment in time. Go for it, Miff.
I'm chuckling away because James has already mentioned Ralston, and God love him. God love him. He's still there, hanging about. And to be honest, I'll go back to, I do see why he was given an extension, because as Ange walked in the door, there was another right back there. Very worrying and alarming, the possibility of starting that game with Ralston at right back. And if we do, that is absolutely horrendous management of the squad.
The other guy that's come in, obviously, is Osaze Urhoghide. So he's come in from Sheffield Wednesday along with Liam Shaw. There is a few questions as to whether he's a centre-half or a right-back. So we were invited to the fan media event on Friday afternoon from Dragon Park, and we got to speak to the two lads. And he was saying predominantly as a centre-half who has filled in at right-back at different times, but certainly most recently, centre-half has been his position. We also can see that Ange seems to go with these inverted full-backs, so they're right and left backs who tend to tuck in, and maybe that would allow him to do that on the right hand side, but there's still a serious question mark there, and it doesn't look like he is quite ready just yet. That, the term been used as raw, and I think you'd have to agree with that, wouldn't you?
Yes, based on the evidence we've seen, yes, absolutely. It would be a very Celtic thing to do, is to sign a promising centre half and play him at right back. it shouldn't make up for our own ineptitude in the transfer market that we've not been able to identify a suitable right back and just bring them in. I just can't believe that there's the possibility that we could start this game against Midtjylland with Ralston at right back and Beaton at centre half. I cannot believe it.
It's looking increasingly likely that we'll be going with a back four of Ralston, Welsh, Beaton and Taylor. And people said that mockingly around about 6 months ago. And you say that, right, okay, very good. This is what's going to happen. And, we do it time after time. And obviously this is a summer of upheaval, but every summer we gamble with the Champions League slots and play makeshift defences. I remember the boy, was it Owen O'Connell? Guys like that. And even, Colo Torre, who was at the end of his days and stuff like that. And we managed to eke over the line there. Beaton seems to come back for his annual appearance at centre half for these games. But it is incredible mismanagement that we've got to this stage, regardless of all else that happened last season. If just one thing you get right is your defence for these games, and we fail time after time after time. And when you think of the money that's at stake, it's bedlam, not to plan for this and give it your very best chance of success.
Again, I just can't fathom as to why, knowing that this game's coming when it's coming. I mean, even if we do sign somebody, they've got to be match fit, are they? Don't want to be bringing the tone down. I feel like I'm bringing the tone down but it's the main thing, for all the positivity around the squad and Ange, and seeing the players look happy at their work, genuinely happy at their work, and acting out his instructions on the pitch, a bit of freshness around the team. You want that augmented by signings, and we're just not cashing in on that. To me, it just feels like a big opportunity missed, not only purely for the point of view that we need those players, to strengthen the starting 11, but there's a feel-good factor around the club due to the new appointment. Back it up. We've not done it. It's
not fair on the players that are there at the moment that should be in the first team squad that you're not augmenting it with, and we need 5 players, probably as a minimum. So you've got the guys that are going to play first team with guys who aren't ready for first team, and that just starts to unravel, and it starts to unravel your positivity as well.
Yeah, it certainly does. One thing, on a more positive note that we obviously seen from experience is that Brendan Rodgers did come in and by and large stuck with the same players and added a couple of bits of quality and genuine quality in Scott Sinclair and Moussa Dembele, but he didn't add a whole lot of numbers to his squad, and obviously got exceptional results. Do you think, from what you've seen so far and the noises coming out, that Ange can maybe get the best out of, I don't know, guys like Ncham, right? So Ncham's going to be around by the sounds of it, and by all accounts, he's indicated he wants to have a big impact this year. We'll take that at face value. Can he get more out of him? Can he get something out of Dembele, who's been at the club for a long time now, but never really been given a chance to shine? Is there a possibility that with no signings coming in the door, Ange can say, right, fine, I'll work with what I've got and just get more from the sum of the parts that are there just now?
Yes, but you're taking an awful gamble. You're basically relying on your new manager to come in within a matter of weeks and work the oracle. I don't think that's a sound strategy. It could work out, but it's a hell of a gamble. Who's going to take the responsibility if that doesn't work? We've known when these qualifiers have been. We've known this. And if that's our chosen strategy, who's going to take responsibility for that when it will most likely fail? Let's be honest. I don't think
it's our chosen strategy. I think it's the one that we've been given, that they've not managed to sign anyone, so they're having to say, well, what can you get out of what you've got?
It's just worrying to me. We've known about these qualifiers for months, and we still sit here just unprepared.
Yeah, I think it is. So what I've done is I've scribbled down what I think is likely to be the starting lineup against Midtjylland. It's just over a week away. I think it's going to be quite close to this. You can absolutely tell me if you think otherwise. So Ange seems to have set up in the same way for the 2 games so far. It's a version of a 4-3-3. So as I mentioned, Barkey will hit the sticks, and then you'll have that back four of Ralston, Welsh, Beaton. I've kind of scribbled actually Montgomery at left back over Taylor. I think that kid's going to put down a marker, and I think he just looks like he's got much more about him. So that's my kind of guess as to who he'll go with at left back. Taylor done some real Taylor stuff again at the weekend, and I know it's his first game back, but anyway, left back we'll leave a question mark over. His midfield 3, which is obviously quite a narrow 3, Callum McGregor's absolutely going to be there, and I think he will love this system. He looks like he enjoyed it. He got plenty of the ball the other day, and I think that will suit him down to the ground. I think he'll be flanked by Sorrell and Shaw. I think he'll go with Shaw, who's young, he's 20 years of age, but he's a powerful lad, Miff, as you mentioned. He's 6'2", he's a solid boy, loads of energy. I think he might fit in there. And then your forward 3, I think he's probably going to go with Ajeti over...
You need to put your captain.
Captain Albian?
Yep.
Absolutely. Why would you not? So we'll go with him over Edouard. I think David Turnbull will definitely play, and so he should. And the other one for me, I think, will possibly be Dembele up as part of that front 3. Now, obviously, these are guys that generally didn't feature last year, certainly in terms of Dembele. Liam Shaw wasn't there, and potentially Montgomery. Is there other guys that I've not mentioned there that you think will get the nod or should get the nod?
Based on what I've seen, specifically in the Charlton game, possibly Mikey Johnson.
Possibly.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd love to see that, and I think he will kick on. I just think he's still a wee bit behind in terms of his return to the fold and in terms of first team stuff. But yeah, I mean, it leaves out guys like, so Taylor I mentioned, Osaze probably not ready to start yet. Ryan Christie just looks like he doesn't want to be there. Mikey Johnson you mentioned possibly has a nod. Henderson, if I know you're a fan.
Yes, I did. Sorry, he was somebody I forgot to mention who had impressed me. I just think he's got a bit of poise on the ball, and someone like that, and he works hard enough to merit a place a place in a starting 11 playing in this style. I think it suits his game both to the point of view that he's willing to work.
Who's he playing in place of?
Well, that's the thing. Shaw's probably the only one, but I like Shaw's physicality.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that midfield three, I would have no issue with that midfield three, possibly Turnbull point off the
We
front.
need physicality. Missed that a lot.
We have missed that. It's more. Maybe you could end up with Shaw right back.
He's versatile, but I don't know if he's that versatile. What it does leave you with on the bench potentially is Cham and Edouard. So the two of them, I love that. They can just sit and pitch about everything. Just moan about the whole setup.
Yep.
The new gaffer's this, he's that, he done this to me. What about them? But what about Cham, James? So obviously we mentioned there that he seems to be, willing to play ball, and we all know what he can do when he's in top form. Do you give him a chance of doing anything this year?
Not to be always seen as the guy who doesn't give anyone a chance. Quality player, there's no denying it, and we kind of mock it, but Rodgers is right. He is a Rolls Royce of a footballer. He's got all the talent you want. Can I trust him? Can I trust Edouard even? If it's clean slates, it's clean slates, and he gets his chance, shows what he can do in training, and then who knows? I don't know if there's maybe a pitch to these guys to say in the next 6 weeks, show everyone what you can do, and that's your window, that's your launch pad elsewhere. But that might get us to through the qualifiers and into the Champions League. So give us everything you've got. We'll get you a nice move. That's maybe what you're looking at with those kind of guys.
Yeah, and I think Ange is the kind of guy that he'll set down markers and targets for guys. He won't say this is open-ended. He'll say, right, by such and such, you need to prove to me that you're willing and able to be part of this, and then we'll see where we land on that one. Just in terms of what we've seen in terms of how Ange is set up, so forgetting the personnel for a minute, in terms of how he's set up in the few games so far, so there's some really obvious strategies of his so far. So in terms of playing out for the back, which we've mentioned, the high press, absolutely. And I think that's what resulted in all three of the goals versus Sheffield Wednesday. The inverted fullbacks that I mentioned, the high line for Barkas. Any of them that you particularly like or don't like?
It's not necessarily that I like or don't like. I think I'm just happy to see a bit more structure around the team, if I'm being honest, because I felt that was the one thing that was lacking. Last season, we just played a kind of a brand of football that was lifeless. It seemed almost to be a kind of unstructured version of the way Rodgers had played. I think what had happened is over time, Lennon had inherited a squad of players that were used to playing a certain way. He briefly tinkered with that and got good results from it. Christie and Edouard in particular were excellent that 9 in a row season. But for whatever happened this season, there was just no fluency in the way that we played, which led to us keeping the ball for no particular reason, not creating enough chances when we had it, and being really soft defensively as well. So it was the worst possible combo you could get. What this does, it adds energy and drive to the team. If we do get caught up the park with 6 players trying to press the ball, the reason for that will be is because they've tried to win the ball really high up the park and the other team have played through us. Now, that's a very, very high risk strategy, but at least you can sign that off to yourself to say, well, if it's high risk, I accept that. There's going to be defenders defending one-on-one in the halfway line, and it's then down to the defenders to get comfortable with that and to train themselves to accept that that's going to happen in games, rather than what happened last season is look absolutely petrified at the thought of a striker running at them. And the Milan game being the classic game where in one instance Duffy's standing off and lets a striker run 40 yards with the ball, cut inside and have a shot and goal, or in the other instance gets far too tight, far too high up the park and gets absolutely skinned. If that's the change in mentality that's coming, then great. I think we all need to buy into that, players included. And my only hope is we don't get caught making the same mistake again this season as we did last season, trying to keep unhappy players. Mm-hmm. Guys like Cham, I'm worried that he's just paying lip service. That's what worries me. And then you end up with these bad apples hanging about the squad. I think we would have rather seen some action the first few weeks for Ange. The likes of Ayer being sold. And again, that's nothing personal against Christopher Ayer. We know he wants away. He stated that he wants away. There's an offer on the table for Norwich, which, if it's true, seems to be an acceptable one. Why would we knock that back in the possible hope that he would stay when we know he doesn't want to.
I think they're trying to up the offer rather than...
I think we're playing potentially a dangerous game, and Cham staying in and around the squad, ball and goalie's still there. I just don't know. I hope we don't go down this route again of trying to keep disenchanted players because we know what it got us.
Yeah, I mean, just on that note, yeah, exactly. We know how costly it was ultimately last season when you've got these guys around the building that just don't want to be there. For Christopher Ajer, though, I think it's an interesting one because for too long, Celtic and maybe some other clubs are guilty of just seeing their talent just walk down south for pennies. Why shouldn't Celtic try and maximise on Ajer? Now listen, if there's only one offer on the table, whether it's Norwich or whoever, but there's several parties been quoted, so Norwich, Newcastle, Brentford, Bayer Leverkusen, lots of teams want this guy, so why shouldn't Celtic say, I can see your 12 million plus add-ons, I'm just going to sit tight because there's this, that and the next thing. Now again, it's that game of cat and mouse that I mentioned, and it's a risky strategy because the last thing you want is for the window to close and you're left with this guy. But should Celtic not hold out for 16, 17, 18 if they feel they can get it?
Yeah, I mean, they've got the budget, these teams, and they go and sign an absolute nobody for 20 million you've never heard of. So we should be at least holding out for true value. I know exactly what you mean. We've seen players go for less than their true value and players not even in their calibre going for double. So, yeah.
I get that point, but our need is greater at the minute. The need for the rebuild, the need for fresh players in that want to play for us is far greater than haggling over the sake of £5 million. If the guy wants to leave, the offer's acceptable, get him out the door and get the new guy in who's going to play in the Champions League qualifier. For me, it's just an absolute no-brainer.
Yeah, and there is suggestions that we're stalling on negotiations with other centre-halves that we're looking to bring in, Vuskovic or otherwise, while we just wait to see what happens with Ajer. And before you know it, another club could swoop in for these guys. So yeah, it is high risk, so we'll need to see how that plays out. One guy who's definitely out the door is Vakun Isuf-Bayo, the Crow. He's off, Miff. What do you make of that?
Well, I don't think he was ever the type of player that would have shown for us, given the way that we play. I think all his goals seem to be kind of running in behind. Bit of a shame because I don't think he was ever really given too much a chance. I hope he does well elsewhere.
9 appearances, 2 goals.
One.
Was it?
2 years.
One thing our agents seem to be good at is offloading our nonsense into Belgium, so fair play to them.
Yeah, he's been there. So I think he signed for maybe just over 2 million. It was actually 2.5 years ago he signed. That's incredible. And I tell you something, there was a big fanfare. The disco lights were in full effect and everything that night. But he's done next to nothing for the club. He got sent off in Europe, didn't he? Scored those 2 goals, inverted commas, against Hearts, which I think eventually get taken off him. And yeah, just over the piece, just a non-entity of a signing.
Were they the 2 goals?
No, I think he got 2 actual goals.
2 real goals. It's hard to say. As you say, Miff, in terms of the style of player he's a bit of a battering ram, kind of big number 9 target. That is just not what Celtic need, is it?
Well, I suppose you could argue yes if utilised correctly, but we weren't really putting balls into the box for him to attack or anything like that. Just an example of the kind of muddled signing strategy that we seem to go through. And is the manager identifying these players, or is somebody at Celtic in the pocket, an agent that just manages to make a bit of money out of this? And it's long been the suspicion that that's the case. Although, credit to Don Mackay, he doesn't be seeing anybody's pocket because we're just signing absolutely nobody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as if to prove that point. But no, I think the Bayo one was just as glaring a sign as any of just how poor our policy has been in recent years. So less Bayos, please, and hopefully...
No, Bayo, Shved and Kamala. I mean, gee.
What a gang. Just to go back to football and matters, Miff, so before you went in your rant there about Ajer and all that kind of stuff, you were talking about Celtic lacking an identity in years past, and now that we've got Ange in the door, there's definitely something there that you can see is what he's been working on. And one of the points you made was about defenders ended up in a one-on-one situation. That's their job. That's a defender's job to deal with one-on-one, and we've seen it last year with Duffy and McGregor try to hear back and cover from in different things. A defender, to all intents and purposes, should thrive on that. They should say, this is what I'm built for, this is what I train for. And you look at those 2 lads for Italy, right? Bonucci and Chiellini, they absolutely love it. Love a tackle, and it's what they've done and made such a career out of. And if we end up at situations where we end up with 1-on-1 or 2-on-2 or 3-on-3 or whatever at the back, that's fine. You've got to trust your defenders to defend. And I think, in seasons past, we've went, oh, geez, we're ended up man for man. That should be okay, because that's the onus should then be on the defender to do their job and let the free-flowing creative guys go and do their thing. So as you say, Miff, if we end up with 6 guys moving forward, your front 3 and the 3 behind them, then that's okay. And you leave your guys at the back to do their job and the forward guys can do theirs. So I think it'll be really interesting. I mean, I think we might end up with a couple of 4-3s this season, a bit of Kevin Keegan type stuff, which will be interesting to see. But Ange has got a very definite way of wanting to play, and I think it's evident in the first 2 games that he's got a particular style.
he said this from the get-go, and if you look at any of his previous work in his interviews, that's what he says. This is the football he plays, and he wants that to be all the way through the team. So I think you're spot on in terms of defenders defending and being used to that and us not being terrified of it. You know, right from almost the start of last season, I kept seeing Callum McGregor popping up in the 6-yard box and scoring. I think he scored 2 or 3 own goals last season by virtue of that. Just where he shouldn't have been. You know, facing his own goal, clumsily trying to get around jobs that aren't his job. Let his defenders defend, and like you say, it frees up the guys to go and play football.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's a very high chance we'll see Callum McGregor evolved under this new system, so we'll look forward to that. Miff, in terms of the training camp overall for Celtic, so obviously they've kind of been down at Dragon Park at Newport since last week. Seems to have been doing some good work. Obviously there'll be a bit of team bonding going on there, 2 wins for 2, but you actually managed to make it across to Newport last week yourself. Anything you want to cover there?
Yes, I did. It was actually lovely. I was down south on holiday, and my brother lives in Bristol, so when we were in Bristol, checked the kind of distance to Newport and how long it would take. It was only half an hour away, so I was there, misses my boys and that, and thought, we'll roll the dice and go. And sure enough, went across, checked out, seen it was Dragon Park, got there no problem. As soon as we arrived, could hear them training. So my boys are quite young, but the park was kind of cordoned off. You know, you couldn't see directly in. But the boys managed to find a wee kind of hidey hole, and they were able to watch the training. So they seen the kind of top end. It was just attacking play, getting the ball out wide, no more than 2 touches, ball across, no more than 2 touch finish as well. And they absolutely loved it. And Ange was taking that session, and he was on them, absolutely on them. Really, really vocal, really demanding. And for me as a fan after last season, it was just great to hear, you know. And also pays a bit of kudos to the fact that I know they did the mic'd up thing, which, as you know, when you're mic'd up, you know you're mic'd up. I know it might slip for a bit when you don't think about it, but hearing him, he just is that driven as a coach. You know, he's demanding the best at every session, which is great to hear. There's also a couple other sessions on the go which John Kennedy and Gavin Strachan were taking. Gavin Strachan was actually really, really vocal.
Yeah. Really
vocal. I know he's had a tough time yet. I'm going to get absolutely powered off my mates for even giving him any sort of credit. But that it was a sort of kind of pressing drill that he was doing, and he was really on top of the players. And it just, for me, it felt like, I don't know if potentially the two of them are feeling more valued under Postecoglou. But basically, he's not got anybody else. If you're Ange, what other option did he really have? He had to come in and hit the ground running. He had to put his trust in somebody. Why not the 2 guys that were there last year, and by all accounts that are liked by the players from what I can gather? Not the ideal scenario when we're looking for a fresh start, but it's probably the safest pair of hands that you could have at the minute, and they do appear to be legitimately working as a team. Stevie Woods was still there as well, but the highlight for the boys was they managed to get photos with the players when they came out. So the security guys were brilliant, by the way, absolutely brilliant. They'd taken a cordon off, but there was 6 52-seaters there. 6 52-seaters, so logistically, I mean, what a palaver it is just to arrange the players to leave the train and then go back to the accommodation and that. It just must have been a logistical nightmare for the security people and the staff to arrange. But every single player stopped, bar ball and goalie, who just put his head down and went straight on the bus.
I think he's keeping a low profile these days.
Keeping a low profile. And Olivier Ncham, but it was funny, right, because Ncham actually acknowledged us. Eddie was walking with Ncham and ball and goalie kind of sprinted onto the bus, and Eddie just had his head down, like, now absolutely tuned out, as you can imagine, and Ncham just clocked us, and he just sort of shepherded Eddie out. He just kind of threw him out and walked straight on the bus, but he was kind of like laughing and waved as he went on. And to be fair to ball and goalie, when ball and goalie went on the bus, he kind of waved off as well. We missed Leo Hjelde as well. He kind of came out and went on, but every other player, and the nicest out of the lot was actually John Kennedy. Also, honourable mention, Greg Taylor. Yes, good old Greg, and Mikey Johnson.
Yeah, fair play. And listen, it's good to hear that, and I'm sure your young lads enjoyed it, but it's also good to hear about the real side of footballers as well, after all the stick they've taken last year, just from a footballing point of view.
Do you know what I would say? Really, really relaxed atmosphere. Really relaxed atmosphere around about it, and possibly that is because it wasn't in Glasgow and there wasn't 300-400 people out waiting. It looked like they were thriving on being left in peace. So they were, I mean, as I say, the players all gave us their time. It was a short amount of time they were going on to the bus, as I say, but it was nice to see. And even for me, just purely as a fan, it just gives you that wee bit, that it restores that
Yeah, a bit more
connection
connection,
again.
aye. Just
with the players.
one name you mentioned there, and to go back to your first 11 for next week, Beaton, why not Hjelde instead of Beaton? Because he's been, certainly Yogi Hughes raved about him from coming down from Ross County. He's been doing well in what he's shown. Is he not knocking the door?
He might be. I don't think he's knocking the door just yet. He's obviously only had a wee bit of game time and he's done okay. And I think he's definitely a more natural centre-half. And listen, he might become the centre-half. What you did see from Beaton in the lead up to the first goal against Charlton was a brilliant through ball, a real defence splitting pass, which he's absolutely got in his locker. And I think that's the kind of player that Ange wants. So he'll have a decision to make, whether he wants a ball playing centre-half
You know how that
centre-half.
goes with Beaton. He does that and then he does the other stuff as well.
Of course.
But Beaton hasn't actually played in midfield for about 2 years.
I know.
And there's the possibility Beaton could actually play in the midfield.
But then it's who does he displace again?
No, absolutely. But I'm actually not that adverse to Beaton the midfielder. I think he's got a bit of class, a bit of poise about him. It's just who, based on that midfield that Tino came out with, I wouldn't want him to be there in place of Shaw, Sorrow or McGregor. And I think, getting back to the point you made about McGregor, I completely agree. I think you could see the shackles coming off Callum McGregor a bit and him going back to the kind of midfielder dictating play that we enjoyed watching under Rodgers so much.
Yeah, and I think, James, you're right, whether it's Leo, Hjelde or Henderson or Moffat, I think if any of these young lads step up, put their head above the parapet and just get consistent with some of their early performances, there is a chance for them, whether they end up starting games or end up on the periphery, who knows. I mean, we've not even mentioned James Forrest in all this chat, because obviously he missed the camp due to a
Close contact thing,
or something like that. And a fit and firing James Forrest is a huge asset as well. I would suggest he probably won't make next Tuesday based on the lack of training, but he could have a huge impact either for the second leg or beyond. So there's loads of guys on the periphery here, and listen, the challenge is over to them now. Time to step up, and as I said about the young kids, there will be no better time to try and make it at Celtic, because with a lack of signings, there's gaps all over the squad, and this is a time to step up and show what they're made of. So that'll be a really interesting thing. Miff, just to go back to something you'd mentioned just in terms of your trip across to Newport and Dragon Park, really interesting to hear your comments on Gavin Strachan, because, listen, we've spoke about it often enough. Context in anything in life, but certainly in football, is really, really important. And all we ever really see as fans so far of Gavin Strachan is pictures in with a laptop, or his face tripping him, or looking rough shaven at training, blah, blah, blah. All still images, right? I would actually really like to see something like Gavin Strachan mic'd up or very similar, because you can't be a nothing coach and get a chance at Celtic. See, if he was as uninspiring as some of the stills look, he wouldn't be anywhere near it.
The suspicion is you can be if your dad's Gordon Strachan.
Well,
and I'm not saying that's true, but that's the suspicion amongst fans.
Yeah, but I don't think Ange would would accept that.
No, I don't think that is true, but you can see why people could perceive that, which adds to the negative perception people have of him. Yeah,
and I think there's a bit of work to be done there from a Celtic point of view. If they're doing these good things in terms of social media, I don't think I've even ever heard a Gavin Strachan interview. You know that? Maybe he's camera shy, I don't know, but I think he's got a lot more to offer, and I'd like to see him given a chance to prove himself one way or another, because as fans, it's very easy and very lazy just to say, what does he do? He just sits there with a laptop, and it's really poor, actually. And we've been guilty of it, in terms of some of our flippant remarks at times. But actually, I think guys like him, and I know for sure, from other guys, John Kennedy absolutely do have something to offer. It's just whether they're enough for Ange to implement what he wants to do. So it'll be a very interesting time over the next few weeks to see how they all bed in as a coaching unit together.
As much as he's setting markers for players, he's setting markers for those two as well. You need to do these things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've no doubt. I don't think he'll accept anything less than 100%. So really interesting to see how we go over the next few weeks. So as we mentioned, the Michelin game, 8 days away from now, real pressure environment. What's your biggest concerns getting into that game? Is it the personnel, or is it the fact that they won't have got up to speed with Ange's specific requirements just yet?
It's just the lack of transfer activity for me, and knowing the deficiencies of the team we all know. However, there is the possibility, like you mentioned, that a new coach is going to come in, implement new ideas, and it's going to lead to improved performance of the players who were so far off the pace last season. I would doubt that very much in the space of just a few weeks. But the other concern for me is Michelin are an improving team. They've posted some really impressive results past few seasons in Europe, and I just don't think we have given ourselves a good enough chance to prepare well enough for this. We knew what was at stake. We knew we needed bodies in. We knew when players want to leave. And we've not really done anything about any of it.
I'd like to know what we have and haven't done, and we'll never know that. That's the problem. I don't think Don Mackay sitting in his office going, I can't maybe get around to that in August. I think he's doing his job, but he's not getting the results, whether it's the Euros getting in the way or whatever it is. But yeah, I don't think he's sitting doing nothing. But the end result's the same. We're not prepared for a crucial qualifier.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I just wonder, and it would be getting away with it, that would be the term, but I wonder if, as mentioned, a reinvigorated Callum McGregor, the new skipper myth, Albian Ajeti, guys like that, if these guys come good, on their day, these guys should be very capable. Now, as mentioned, there's obvious deficiencies elsewhere. Goalkeeper, right back.
If you take Montgomery out of the problem in the back four and goalie, they're all a problem. The two centre halves, the right back, the goalie, they're all a problem. Going forward from there, it's actually, I'm pretty comfortable with it as an early qualifier line. It's all behind that line.
I just want to go back to Barkey. He is so languid.
Yeah.
Just the most laid back guy I've ever seen in my life.
I don't want to laid back goalie.
Even sort of kind of just slouches about when he's walking. Just honest, unbelievable. But if you think of Foster's presence, chest out, big shoulders and that, he's like the kind of slouch, just walking, Mr. Soft, man. That's what. Remember the old advert, Mr. Soft? That's what he's like. Listen, I hope he comes good. It was just mental seeing him. I know because of COVID and things like that, guys won't have. You'd see the players entering match days and things like that, or up at Lennox Town. The vast majority of fans haven't seen that. Just having that opportunity to see that was just dead noticeable. Just how laid back he was. For a keeper, you always think a keeper is something
a big presence.
He's just so laid back. But again, who knows? Somebody coming in, if there's one thing that Barkey would have been lacking, is a bit of confidence or a feeling that somebody had confidence in him, because he did get messed about to a degree. We used 3 different keepers. To me, he might be somebody that benefits for that new management style, coming in saying you're my number one, and you might actually see an improvement in him.
He needs a back four as much as anything else that he can play in week in, week out and get to trust. All things said and done, new goalie's still the answer for me.
Yes,
I think so. I just don't think Celtic are going to have a settled back four anytime soon. So we've mentioned the suggested back four just now. Any one of them could be. There's none of them that are nailed on. Welsh is probably the most solid pick there, and the jury's still out for some on Stephen Welsh, and we'll see how he fares in these upcoming games. But yeah, just on Barkas, he's the opposite of Fraser Foster, isn't he? Foster's powerful and strong and commanding and everything you'd want from a goalie, and Barkas is just a very different type. So whether he can come good or not, and listen, I think Ange will give him every chance. I think he's going to say, right, you've got an opportunity, but it'd be criminal for us not to be looking for another keeper in the background. So we'll see how that plays out. Right back, we've mentioned, and we've covered that in depth. For a variety of reasons, there's now a serious gap up front. So we're not getting into the details of that right now, but obviously we know that Bio is also away, and whether he'd have featured at all, I would seriously doubt. You've effectively got Albian Ajeti, and it's good to see how he's started so far. And Edouard, who could be gone tomorrow. So, where do you go from there? Because even however encouraging it is that some of the new kids coming through are showing something, none of them are strikers. And it's mad that Celtic don't have the best young striker in the country coming through.
That is really concerning for me. When was the last time we had a decent striker come through?
Yeah, and there must be kids coming through in Scotland showing talent like that at these 15 to 19 age groups. Where are they? Who are they playing for, if not for us?
I have no idea. I mean, obviously the national team, they've relied on guys like Shea Adams, so obviously not from around these parts. Lyndon Dykes, similar idea. Kevin Nisbet has obviously been mentioned, but that's gone a bit quiet as well. But yeah, there's a serious lack up front, and it's one thing setting up in a way that you press and you attack, but at the end of the day, football's all about scoring goals, and if you don't do that, you're not going to beat Midtjylland or anybody. So yeah, we'll need to see what happens there.
I think the Nisbet thing went quiet when he realised we had to pay money for a player.
Aye.
Celtic don't really like it.
Didn't fancy that approach. No. So in the week ahead, so a couple of more friendlies to come. We've got Bristol City on Wednesday night and Preston North End. Preston North End on Saturday. That will be the first game back at Celtic Park. What do you expect from those lineups? So I think what we'll have on Wednesday against Bristol City will probably be as close to what we'll go for against Midtjylland, and I think he'll go a wee bit lighter on Saturday. I don't think he's going to give guys 90 minutes on the Saturday ahead of a big game on the Tuesday. So I think Wednesday will be the closest indicator for what we'll get on Tuesday against Midtjylland. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. That's where he's really going to find out if you're going to give a team maybe 70 or 80 minutes together rather than these 30 minutes, 45 minutes and change. That's the opportunity to do it rather than the Saturday. So it's going to be interesting from the lineup you suggested there. if you see an Encham and Edouard, quality players with bad attitudes, do you want players that don't have quite their experience and quality but have all the attitude going? And that's what I'm leaning towards, is that kind of thing at Celtic. And just to see again up close how the formation works for the players, how the high energy, high press stuff works. But yeah, I think it's going to be something very close to what you've got in your paper there.
Yeah, and I just think regardless who you are, for Ange Postecoglou, if your attitude's not 100%, if it's anything less, you just don't feature. I just think that's the kind of guy he is. So whether you're Odsonne, Edouard, one of the kids, whatever it might be, I just think unless you're absolutely on it and buying into what he is dictating, then you won't be anywhere near it. What about yourself, Miff? Do you think that'll be the case on Wednesday?
I would suspect so, because we're running out of time. Disappointing that there's not a lot to play for in the Ben Davies Cup on Saturday. But I would think if you're Ange, you want 16, 18 players that are going to be as fresh as possible for the Michelin challenge, because it's going to be exactly that, a challenge. And like James says, you probably are going to need 100% effort off every player rather than 80% effort off a player whose class will probably get them through. I think specifically Edouard more so than Encham. I don't think Encham's as close to the first team as what Edouard would be. I think in fairness to Eddie, he has looked reasonably sharp. To me, the Edouard situation is very interesting. It's intriguing. If you've got him invested in playing for another 12 months, is it better just to keep him rather than take a cheap deal on him and then go and try and sign an equivalent? I don't know is the honest answer to that. I think that might be going back down the track that we did last season. But guys like Edouard are part of the problem that we have at the minute, because what do you do? What would that do to Ajeti, who's been on form, who started, captain, scored a couple of goals, and then the big game comes around, Eddie starts, but then Eddie gets sold and you're turning to Ajeti and going, right, it's your turn to score the goals now, mate.
Yeah, wherever game deals you can go in.
There's loads of different nuances and complexities contained within it. So intriguing. I think he'll go with Ajeti. That's just my personal opinion. I think he'll go with Ajeti. I think he's shown that. I think he's kind of made that message to Ajeti for the start of the season. Just to touch on Ajeti, had at least 6 or 7 comb over attempts at his hair before the photo get taken with the boys as well. So he obviously cares about how he looks.
Important photo.
Aye. I think Ange just kind of made that statement to Ajeti that you're my main man. Yeah. And I think we'll hopefully see the fruits of that over the coming season, because I think the general consensus with Ajeti was, if we get the ball in the box to him, he's going to score goals. Mm-hmm. We did seem to do that at the start of last season, and then for whatever reason it just all fell apart.
Yeah, when you first saw his first couple of games, you're thinking, great, penalty box striker, this will be just what we need. But it just unravelled quickly. It's going to be like COVID gets blamed for everything, Lennon gets blamed for everything at Celtic, so maybe it just falls under that hat.
Ajeti's unwillingness to move didn't help either, though.
No, it certainly did not, but I think there's no doubt that he's an extremely talented guy, and I think last year we just seen a version of Albian Ajeti, and unfortunately not a good one. And I'm hoping, for his sake as much as anyone else's, that he's turned a corner in terms of his attitude and where he's at. He's certainly looking trim, he's looking sharp, so hopefully he can kick on starting against Michelin next Tuesday. Just one final question, but applies to two guys. Do you think we'll see Christopher Ajer in a Celtic shirt ever again? And the same question for Bolingoli.
No to both, for different reasons, I suppose. Ajer would go with your best wishes. He's done what he kind of set out to do. He's now at a level where he wants to kick on, and I think it's time to let him go and do that and take the fee and work this Moneyball system that we should have been working in much more extensively. Bolingoli, nothing to do with COVID. Plenty of players playing that game and getting away with it and all that stuff. Just not good enough. Before he went and did all that mad stuff, he showed you he wasn't good enough to play for Celtic. So Bolingoli is not good enough. Ajer, because it's time to go.
Where are you at in that, Miff?
I don't think we will see Ajer playing for Celtic again. No, pretty much as James says, I wasn't a huge fan of Bolingoli prior to his Imagine last season. And if Ange thinks he's good enough and he comes in, he'll get my backing, absolutely, 100%. Just for me, I just think positionally he was just all over the place.
Wild.
All over the place. And wasn't he would quite happily get caught up the park and no track back at all. Not of the required standard as far as I'm concerned. But for Ajer, like James says, that's the project that we work to. Somebody that comes in, is young, we improve them, they become first team ready, and then you sell them for a healthy profit. That's how the model should work. And Christopher Ajer is a classic example of that. Just for me, I just hope we don't go down that route of messing about, like we've already referenced, messing about for the sake of an extra few £1 million when we need that money in to spend on players that are going to be with us for the next 4, 5, 6 years.
Yeah, so let's see what happens with those two guys. But just to make my own point on it, I think you're totally right. I don't think we'll see either or for a couple of different reasons there. James, just as we're starting to wrap up the show, what's your own confidence levels at this stage ahead of the Midtjylland game and beyond? How are you feeling about things?
Midtjylland experienced team, been getting some good results. We could catch them a little bit cold in terms of this real high energy. When you watch that first half on Saturday there, it was pretty phenomenal when they're coming at you, Celtic. You could really catch teams on the hop, and then you could go and score a couple of goals against them at the other side as well. Yeah, my confidence levels for that game, somewhere about a 6, which is probably 3 more than you usually getting into qualifiers for Celtic. So 6 out of 10. But you can never be confident as a Celtic fan getting into qualifiers because we always do what we're about to do. This is the one season where they've maybe got some mitigating circumstances and excuses, but it can't be repeated next year or any other year.
Yeah. What about yourself, Miff? Do you need to see bodies come in the door at Celtic Park this week to settle you down, or?
Yes, that's as simple as that. I have very low expectations against Midtjylland just because of the situation. I can't see, just the logical part of my brain, even with improvement from the manager into the squad. I just can't see that being enough to win the tie over 2 legs.
Well, he's got 7 more days in the training ground to work at it, so let's see what Ange can do between now and then. So 2 wins from 2 friendlies is all well and good, but in just over a week's time, the real stuff kicks off for Ange and his squad, and it'll be interesting to see how he lines up and with who, as we look to secure Champions League progression. We've no doubts about Captain Ajeti here at the Celtic Exchange, but there's still some serious gaps to be filled elsewhere if we're to see genuine progress under the new man. Thanks to Miff and James for joining me on today's show, and as always, our thanks to you for listening. If you're enjoying what we do, please continue to support us by sharing this episode with anyone you think will enjoy it, and you can also keep up with us during the week on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook and YouTube. Thanks for listening, we'll see you again next week.
Sponsored by 1010 Podcasts.